Good morning, friends. Stephen Benoon here with Israeli News Live on our Patreon channel. And this is not actually the video I was planning on doing on our Patreon channel. There's a couple of videos that I want to work on. Let me make myself a note so I don't forget it. One is going to be the rising sea levels. And I'm going to share again. Spoke about a dream I had a little while back about that. But I did not realize how accurate that dream is. Wow, not till just recently. So I'll try to get that one done. If I can't do it tonight, I'll try to do that in the morning. And then I also am still wanting to maybe do an update on the binary system, kind of give you guys some information about that. But today we're going to be talking about the economic situation that's happening right now. As you can see, Yahoo News is reporting banking crisis. President Joe Biden says taxpayer funds won't be used to bail out SVB Signature Bank as we have this collapse with this bank. They attempted to calm market and taxpayer jitters on Monday morning, saying in remarks that Americans can have confidence in the banking system after the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank. America can have confidence, he says, that the bank system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them, Biden said from the White House. Well, this is after a massive people taking their money out of the bank, turning it into cash, which quite frankly, I personally don't see where that does you a whole lot of good either. If the economy is going to fall, the cash is going to become valueless as well. In other words, we're going to have inflation. So you could take the money out. Now, granted, I do get the idea. And I do think it's wise to have cash on hand to some extent that you can. Because if the system does collapse, which eventually it's going to, this is the whole purpose. They want to go to a one world government. They want to go to a cashless society, etc. And so therefore, when I look at this situation that's going on, I realize that for the short term, cash would be valuable in the respect that they may limit your purchasing power with your debit card, credit card. Whereas with cash, you would not be limited as much unless they start limiting you in the store as well, which they may realize that and do that to you anyway. So it doesn't matter which way you go, they're gonna nab you one way or the other. But I do like the idea of some cash being out. But then again, I think that we contribute to the collapse when we do all this withdrawal as well. So I'm not necessarily for just emptying out your account. I don't think that's the wise idea. But I wanted to share some thoughts with you guys because I've got a good friend of mine, Ethan. I'll just say his first name for you, and he's a brother. He's a world-renowned economist. He watches the markets, etc., things like that. I don't want to give any more information about him than this, though. But he has on multiple occasions given me amazing information about the economy, what would happen. He would know in advance just from his analysis of what he sees going on. And a lot of what's happening now, he had wrote months ago about this coming. And so I'm going to share with you here, and I'll get with him. I know he does have a Twitter account, but that might be risky if I just up and say it, right? Because, well, maybe not. It may be perfectly okay, but I'm just going to share with you some things here because I asked him, I said, are banks really collapsing? I asked this question to Ethan on Saturday. I said, so many start the fears, but it's not yet time. So was curious of your perspective. When I say it's not yet time, through my intel connections, I always hear that the way they want to collapse it is through a catastrophic event in the U.S., i.e. a nuclear bomb, asteroid, something like that, where they could justify the collapse being that some kind of disaster hit America, and that's what really caused it. He answers me this way here. The tweet threads I shared during the second half of last year pertain to this. Second half of last year, right? I can share them again if need be, so you don't have to scroll all the way back to when they were previously sent. In the West, yes, this is the start of it. The Eurozone, Japan, and U.S. economies will collapse initially. The IMF has already been working with Egypt to restructure their financing repayment obligations. Otherwise, they would have announced default between December of 2022 and now. In large part, this has been amplified by the crypto-backed lending. Lending as US dollar, the crypto acts as collateral for the loans. The elevated DXY index is impacting developing nations by increasing the difficulty of repayment for their dollar-dominated debt. The banks will be nationalized this time. Boy, there's your new world order, right? The banks will be nationalized this time, not bailed out as it was during the great financial crisis. Well, what do you know? Isn't that what Joe Biden is basically saying here? Says taxpayer funds won't be used to bail out SVB Signature Bank. No, you're going to be nationalized. He also says in another news feed here, where was it at that I had? Silicon Valley Bank executives will be fired and system is safe. They're going to be fired. You're going to put in some national puppets, right? Anyway, he said so the bank will be nationalized this time, not bailed out as it was during the great financial crisis. The M2 money supply, cash and cash equivalents, has been drained as coordinated policy pushed by the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, who is also being advised by my former mentor, being under the impression that he's implementing a plan which he assumes I gave him. I'm going to kind of have to redact some of this here, so we won't go any further on that issue there. Let me go a little further down. When Western nations made the decisions, now this is part of the tweets from the second quarter of last year that he tweeted. So let me share those with you. The Western nations made the decision to freeze the CBOR's international FX reserves. It was also explicit action that communicated to the rest of the world the U.S. had fortified its economic hegemony by choosing to betray the liberties of capitalism it once held dear. That's one. Short midterm narrative synopsis. Yellen's Africa agenda. That's number one. Number two, February 1st, rate hike. Number three, Powell, the hero we need but we never asked for. Performed a bit more digging and have concluded that Digital Currency Group is the bottom of the enigmatic labyrinth that is ultimately managing this and the chaos that's unraveled throughout 2022. It's a plan that's been years in the making. Marco, volatility, liquidity, crypto. Okay, they're responsible for the pumping of tether reserves. Short version, they're ultimately attempting to establish a decentralized, collateralized stable coin where the collateral is centralized fiat. He says, I believe, in responding to some of these tweets that I just read to you, he said, I believe that the most of main narratives that have driven everything to the point were currently relative to what I had already posted specifically, that is. So I said to him, how long do you think they're gonna hold up? Because my question is as of right now, even though they're going to go through this changing and nationalizing the banks, etc., I wanted to kind of get an idea of a time frame that he thinks. He says, so I'm going to give you a longish answer, but the short answer is it's reflexive. Generally, I have the tendency to anticipate risk events much sooner than others in terms of them coming to fruition, on the basis that I assume more smart money participants have already been made aware of the approaching risk. Reflexively, coined by George Soros, and markets proposes that because not all participants price in information simultaneously, it creates inefficiencies in their pricing new factors, i.e. short-term volatility. But as information and technology have continued to tighten, This time information gap, it also assists in prioritizing the importance of specific information relative to the circumstances. Even considering this, I would estimate by mid-April, we should be in a similar scenario relative to what unraveled in 2020, but the Federal Reserve and other central banks won't have the same capacity to implement easing measures like they had before. My most liberal estimate would the West unraveling before the end of June, which also brings the additional variable of fiscal budget ceiling into play at that time. Now, he shared with me, let me see here, he shared with me a couple more tweets that I said, New York Department of Financial Services, we now have possession of Signature Bank. Okay, he was sharing a tweet from them. U.S. Federal Reserve to provide liquidity to the U.S. depository institutions. Each Federal Reserve Bank would have advances to be qualified borrowers using certain types of securities as collateral. He says, given the headlines that are coming out in the past few minutes, combined with the Treasury and Fed issuing statements right now as well, gives me the indication this is escalating much more quickly and aligns more closely with my mid-April projection. He also quoted here, Federal Reserve's officials, the two failed banks' owners will lose their investments. He said they're already being nationalized. And then he talked about Joe Biden giving a speech the next day, which is what he did. And his speech, like I said, followed right in suit with what Ethan was saying here. I will get with Ethan to make sure it's okay to share his Twitter account with you guys. And I don't believe Ethan actually even uses his real name on his Twitter account, so I think it will be safe to do that. In fact, I know he doesn't. So let me just double check with that so that you guys can keep up better with what's going on. Ethan is a brilliant mind when it comes to the economic situation, and we've shared his information with you guys before. Whether or not you realized it or not, we have. And it's always been spot on, very accurate, very close to what's going to happen. And even this part when he was talking about Egypt earlier, that was another issue too, because he told me that Egypt would be the catalyst for the collapse of the world economies. And I thought that was interesting. I shared that with the Intel folks in Washington. At first, they kind of scoffed at it. Then they got back with me a couple of weeks later, and they're going like, wow, how did he know that? They did some digging and found out that, yes, that was the plan. Collapse Egypt first and then bring down the rest of the world to follow. So I don't know exactly which way that's going to go, but I wanted to share this with you. Stephen Ben-Nun here with Israeli News Live, and have a blessed day.